I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Hey everybody, it's Lauren Kling. Welcome back to AfterBuzz TV and Tales from the Loop. Today we are going to talk about episode 2, which is called Transpose, but I am not going to do it alone. I am joined by my friend Kevin Allen. How you doing, Kevin?
Hey, I'm great, Lauren. Thanks for having me back.
Good. Thank you for coming back. It's just you and I, so if it wasn't you, that would be weird. If all of a sudden you were here and then you were not here, that would fit in with Tales of the Loop from the Loop, wouldn't it?
That's true. Well, at least the first episode, but we already covered that.
All right,
That's already
right.
up online. This
So
is
we are
very much a two-person episode we're going to talk about.
That's right. So we are here for episode 2. Now, you might be wondering, why are these guys talking about this show? What do they have that has anything to do? Well, I'm Lauren and I love time travel. I love all things time travel and I'm a next gen nerd. That's what I'm admitting why I'm qualified for this. How about you, Kevin? What qualifies you to nerd out to this show?
I'm kind of a little bit of a philosophical nut. So this show tackles some like really deep metaphysics and existential problems. They're not problems, just things that they're not. That's what's interesting about this show. It's not problems. It's like, hey, what if things just weren't completely normal, like at all?
Right. But we don't treat these weird things as weird. They're just a part of life in this small Ohio town.
It seems that way, yeah.
Yeah. So I know you're a big fan of alternate universe type
That too.
things.
Hmm.
So that's kind of a time travel alternate universe thing. So perfect. So in this episode, there's a discovery in the woods that 2 teenage boys find. That would be Jacob and Danny. So let's break
Hmm.
down this episode. We've got
Yeah.
2 friends. We've got Jacob, who we saw in the first episode, right? And then we've got his
Yep.
friend Danny. They're just hanging out. Um, and they are hanging out in the woods and they discover this thing that they call a sea mine, like this round circular thing that has some weird writing
Yeah.
on it. It
It looked
looks,
like an escape pod to me.
yes, an
Like,
escape pod, like Russian or European. And again, you're going to have to remind me that I need to cool it down as far as trying to figure out what these things are, because that's what I like to do.
yeah. Well, and I've mentioned in our previous episode that the showrunner, he's all about like not trying to explain the mechanics or even have them make any sense. Like the loop itself, this underground mysterious mechanism, it doesn't do one thing. It just makes all weird things possible. And this just is one of them. No
Right.
one can explain how this device works, but they crawl into it and it just happens to them.
Right. So in episode 1, we had the girl who basically time traveled to another time period. In this
Mhm.
episode, we have Danny and Jacob. Jacob gets into this device orb, and then we hear this whoosh, which we'll hear a few times. We see
Yeah.
Danny passed out, and then what happens when Jacob comes out?
Does he come out? This is the question.
Right.
So Danny wakes up on the just like staring at the sky above him, and I can only imagine that Jacob is also just like coming back to life, so to speak, in the orb. But Danny starts to get up and like notice his hands, and then realize that he is actually Jacob in Danny's body, and vice versa. So essentially, they've switched identities. They've switched places.
Right.
No,
But
it's switched bodies. That's the only way I can. It's a body switching show.
of
It's
course.
that old chestnut.
Of course it is. It's like you have procedurals on TV, you have the body switching
Yeah,
shows.
it's
Like
Freaky Friday.
Yes, it's the Freaky Friday episode. Um, but then yeah, then Danny wants to
Mhm.
switch back. No, Jacob
Yes,
wants to switch back.
it's
Jacob,
hard to tell.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
this
so
episode opens with a lot of slice of life vignettes for Jacob, and so that's, oh my god, that's the character we're following at first. We learn a little bit about his day-to-day routine. He's not confident. He likes to draw. He's got a kind of mixed relationship with his family because he's going to go graduate and they want him to go work in the loop because he has
mhm,
all of this
right.
potential. where then, oh man, so we start to follow both of them. Danny's story is that he does not have the potential of Jacob, so much so that he lies about it to his best friend. Is very unhappy with his life, it seems. Sorry, what was the question? I'm
Yeah.
trying to keep track of who's who.
I don't know, but I think you're covering where I was going anyway.
Okay.
So yeah, we were looking at Jacob's life, and then Danny, who his parents say, "Did you talk to your uncle about working at the
Oh
rock
yeah,
quarry?" So we've
right.
got that. Now, I don't know if you noticed when we saw Jacob sitting out in that field, kind of where everyone hangs out, the field with
Oh
that.
yeah, those
Yeah.
giant transponder looking things.
Right. He happens to look over and he sees May, that girl that he drew in his book, kind of gives her
Hmm.
a glance. She doesn't really do
Doesn't
anything,
return it.
doesn't really.
Yeah.
And so we're like, okay, so like you were saying, Jacob really might have more potential, brain potential, but not really socializing. He seems more of an introvert, a quiet guy.
Yeah, he's definitely unconfident. He's not comfortable in his own skin. And even though he has this potential and he's like his parents like him, uh, his uncle who runs the loop likes him. I'm sure his teachers like him because he gets good grades. He doesn't like who he is. And I actually thought he had more to gain by doing this whole body switching scenario. Danny seemed like he wanted to do it just for kicks
Right.
and or if anything, just to get out of painting a barn. Um, but Danny had this chance to be the confident guy, and I felt like it was working for him for a while because when he was painting the barn on Danny's behalf as Danny, this girl just came up to him and wanted to hang out, and then she wanted to make out, and like he didn't have to do anything to be that cool guy who gets the girls. But when May got involved, as you mentioned, like, and he saw that Danny as Jacob was kind of moving in on May, he wanted to switch back. And he just wasn't comfortable being in somebody else's skin either.
Right. It's interesting that, Jacob is painting as
Mm.
Danny. And then Lauren, the girl, comes and we assume it's a girlfriend. They go inside the room where I guess music happens inside there, and then they
Oh yeah,
kiss.
yeah. Hmm.
So, of course, we know it's Jacob in there because when Lauren goes in for the kiss, that kind of hits his teeth. He doesn't know how to kiss. Maybe he's never kissed before. And then they try it again
Yeah,
and it all works. So we're seeing a continuation of Jacob and being reminded that Jacob is still inside this body. Um, but then what's interesting is we follow Jacob in Danny's body as he goes home. He sees
hmm,
his mom talking with his deaf sister.
mm-hmm,
And
hmm.
there was that point where you wondered, does the sister know who's inside the body? Does she know something's up? There was something in there that seemed weird when they saw each other. And
Yeah,
then,
and yeah, I think you're right. I feel like the show is very quietly hinting at that. Um, she she interprets everything through visuals, where he could walk into a room and everyone, hey, how are you? I'm fine. Okay, he walks like Danny, he talks like Danny, sounds like Danny. It's probably Danny, but she's probably more attuned to noticing subtle variations in his face and how it's moving.
mm, yeah.
And kudos to the actor for performing Jacob in Danny's body, because all of those, like, he was hunched over more, had very low status energy, he was more um, like inward to himself. He was exuding introvertedness, and I can only imagine that she noticed, and not just because I'm making all these wild accusations, but because she like followed him into the bathroom while he was taking a shower and had this look of like, what's up, what's wrong with you,
Right.
and he didn't talk back in sign language, so yeah, I mean, she must have noticed he was behaving differently.
Right. So just like we did at the beginning, at the top of the show, where we're kind of just following Jacob in his day-to-day life, We continue to do that until we see the two meet up, and Danny says that he wants to stay in Jacob's body for another day.
Yeah.
Now that he's got this potential to work in the loop, to have success that he never did before. It's interesting because, you know, um, as a geek, as a self-described geek, I can remember in school when I wished I was one of the popular kids. So this is really interesting in the way it addresses the grass being greener on the other side. You wanting
Hmm.
what you don't have, no matter who you are or your circumstance, which is really interesting.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's like the Prince and the Pauper story, just in a very, very different setting. Two different characters who are on the same plane. But yeah, the grass is the greener. That's perfect summation of what's going on here. Um, it's just one of them came to that moral that, you know what, my life was fine. The grass wasn't greener on the other side. But the other one decided that yes, the grass is in fact greener, or at the very least, I I have grass. Like with Danny, it felt like less of, oh, I can have greater success living as Jacob, but just I'm not condemning my life to one of breaking rocks forever and being like in servitude. So I felt like
Right.
he was trying to escape a punishment rather than reach for just a better life. So yeah,
Right. And
he's
didn't we
condemning his
also,
friend to do
right.
that.
And didn't we also hear Danny's parents yelling, arguing at one point? I
Hmm.
think in the background. So we know that his home life wasn't the best in the world. Um, but what's interesting is a little bit later on, we see Danny get out of the car being dropped off by his father, and his father goes to hug him. So kind of like an apology to his and his mom's behavior the previous night.
Oh,
Um,
see, I took it as that's just how they are, but Jacob wouldn't know that they're a hugging family, and he hugs him every time he drops him off. Because like when that scene started, he was like, "Hey, you slept in." You know, it's one of those subtle things that yeah, he's in tune to a different internal clock or whatever.
yeah,
Um, we got to go. You know, that there's this routine that happens every morning, but because it's somebody else filling in for Danny, he's not on this routine. So I just assumed the hug was just a normal thing that he just wasn't aware of.
right.
Um, Also, I may be biased because I had the subtitles on during that conversation, the shouting match. And while you're absolutely right, I think the shouting match was there to convey that the home life isn't great. They were shouting about Danny's future. And just the father's like, I don't want to make him break rocks all day. I'm not going to force him to do that. And the wife and his mother felt, well, he has to though. He has no other choice.
Yeah.
So honestly, I feel like that fight may not have been a regular thing. It could have been. It's hard to say.
Yeah, but yeah, of course, we all kind of interpret these pieces differently, more so
It's
because
hard.
they're not thrown, shoved down our throats, which,
Yeah,
is
true.
interesting because we've talked about this in the last episode. This show isn't about explaining away everything in the easiest possible way.
Hmm.
It's really subtle and it makes you figure it out. It's like going to a museum and looking at paintings, you interpreting what you think the painting represents. Uh,
How appropriate.
how appropriate. So we get to the point where Danny returns to the sea mine by
Hmm.
himself and goes
Man,
in. And of course, I'm like, wait, how does the rule work here?
exactly, because they don't know. Like
Right,
they tested out earlier that okay, if we do it again, we can switch back, and that's the only
right.
rule or guideline they have to go on. So when he stepped in there, I was like, oh my god, how Twilight Zone is this going to get? Is he going to switch with the next closest person, or did they automatically switch back? Or is he going to like switch with a fly, or like who's going to come out of there? Um, I was pins and needles at that point because I just knew something bad was going to happen because they're not doing it the same way.
Right, right. We knew something was going to happen, but like the last episode where Alma was lost and Loretta was on a hunt, again, Jacob was on a hunt for for Jacob was on a hunt for Danny. One
Mhm.
was on the hunt for the other one.
Yeah.
Kind of like, and we could guess what was he going to do if he found him. Um, but what was interesting was seeing Jacob give his drawing to May,
Mhm. Well,
um, and then going into the woods to look for. See, my notes by now are all messed up.
yeah, so at this point, like, I feel like Danny as Jacob is starting to act the villain. He's condemning his friend to a worse life and one that he feels is a prison, so to speak. He's basically stealing his stuff in order so he could woo over the girl that he is in love with. Like he is step by step stealing his life. His brother came in and was like, "Can you teach me how to draw cars?" And he was like, "Oh, nope, can't. Sorry." And just every step of the way, he just didn't care about the damage he was doing to those around Jacob or to Jacob himself. So sorry, I just had to
Yep.
say that because I'm not on Danny's team now. I was a little surprised that he went into the woods to go find him and started to care again.
Yeah.
Um, and then he got like I don't know what he found, like what he saw, but it
Right.
was awful.
Yes, and then we go to Danny going to the hospital to see Jacob unconscious in the hospital bed.
Yeah.
Uh,
He
and
found his friend like basically lifeless
right,
in that orb.
right. And I didn't know what that means. So at this point, did you know what was going to happen?
No, because like I said, my mind went to like, oh God, he switched places with a centipede, and now there's a centipede brain living inside
Right,
Danny's body, and Jacob is stuck inside of a centipede's body, or something to that level of just not cool. So I didn't realize what had officially happened. I thought maybe when he was in the bed that his consciousness just left the body and is now just out in the ether because there was nothing to switch back.
right.
Uh, but whatever it was, it came down to that his friend is gone.
Yeah, yeah. Again, going back to the using just what we know from the first episode, there's that point where somebody's there and then they're not there.
Mm.
So I see. I'm always looking for. I'm such a type A guy. I'm always looking for patterns. So
I didn't catch that.
we'll have to see. So Danny goes back to the mine to see it being dismantled.
Oh, yeah.
And then there was a thing, Danny, before the reveal, Danny signs to his sister to say, I'm still here.
Right. So after seeing the damage he dealt and that he's past the point of no return with the dismantling of the orb, um, I feel like he started to really feel some regrets for his actions. Um, and he knows that it's no longer like an option. He is on this path, whether he likes it or not. So at the dinner table with Jacob's family, he's playing the part. So I don't want to draw anymore. I want to do the mind or the I want to work in the loop after all. He's gonna take that better life because there's nothing else he can do.
Hmm.
But he goes back to get his pet tarantula because he still cares for his pet, and he goes back um, while he's there and tells his sister like I'm not dead, I'm still here, like as if that would be any real help,
Right.
because he's walking out on her one way or the other.
Yeah.
Uh, I felt
And
like it was a last ditch effort to make his efforts not as dire as they are, as if he didn't abandon his family. But when it comes down to it, he did.
right. He wanted that new life. That was what, I mean, that's the crux of the whole episode. And so it
Yep.
sounds like you kind of you were hoping he would redeem himself. He really didn't. He kind of at the risk of losing his family, he went on his own. And then when we see the robot show up, and the robot's kind of going back and forth. I literally wrote in all caps, "Oh snap!"
Yeah.
he's like,
Mine,
Jacob?
I, mine was no dot 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 way. Ah, what a what a weird and tragic conclusion. Like it's Jacob. I mean, he was standing outside his window, which I think he had done prior. There was a shot earlier where there was a silhouette outside of real Jacob's window, and I think it was
Mhm.
fake Jacob or Danny Jacob. I don't know. So I feel like that was Jacob not in the body of Danny, but now in the body of this robot, which we know is not active because we're in the adult Loretta timeline.
Right.
Um, so it came back to life because there's a consciousness in there now, and it's shifting around in its own space the way an uncomfortable person would, and it ran off the same way someone who's not confident would. It's
Right.
Jacob.
You know, if you're technical about it and you get really nerdy,
Go ahead.
you could say that that the fact that the robot had a consciousness or was able to take on Jacob's consciousness means that Jacob should have taken on the consciousness of the robot, but because the robot is in the older Loretta timeline, it's not working. So
Yeah. It basically took on the consciousness of a deactivated
robot.
consciousness robot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting.
Um
Anything else
yeah.
about the breakdown of the episode?
Yeah, one thing I think that really is the crux of the episode is when Danny, posing as Jacob, is sitting at the dinner table with his family and saying, "Oh, I don't want to draw anymore. I'd rather work in the loop." Um, Basically saying like, "I'm not like I'm not Jacob anymore."
Mhm.
Family,
Yeah.
old Jacob is gone. Old Jacob drew, and new Jacob doesn't. Um, and he's playing this part. He's committing to this ruse, and not like gleefully or like villainously in any way, but that's what he's doing. And then he's his face just kind of sinks a bit as he's condemning, now this is his future, this is the path he's on forever. And they're like, "What's wrong?" And he just says, "I miss my friend." And that wasn't the ruse. That was Danny speaking as Danny.
Yeah.
And I think there's the moral of the story, kids. Like, it
Yeah.
wasn't worth it. He got what he wanted, and it's not what he wants.
Yeah. All right. So that's the breakdown of the show. You have some news, Kevin, you want to share?
Yeah, so I wanted to bring up that Nathaniel Halpern, the showrunner and creator of this series, he's previously known as the writer and producer of Legion, which is a big Fox property, and he's expanding his work with Fox by signing a new deal with Fox 21's television studios to develop and produce and create more original content. Legion was a huge hit. It's unlike anything that's been on television, and everyone seems to be loving what from the Loop is doing. It's unlike anything we've seen in sci-fi. So Bert Salke, the president of Fox 21, he was saying about Nathaniel Halpern, "He's simply one of the most imaginative and original creators we've ever seen, and exactly the kind of visionary we want to be in business with." I took this as that Fox, now that they're part of Disney, are going to be going in a whole new direction. We've had 20th Century Fox. 21st Century Fox
Right.
is going to be a brand new thing, and they're bringing on this visionary for it, and I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, except for the Orville, if we're talking about Fox properties, I'm trying to think of other sci-fi shows recent of this kind of sci-fi genre.
There was The Gifted. I've been meaning to watch that show ever since it came out. But no, I would say this kind of highbrow sci-fi is what Fox has been known for.
Yeah.
That's why Legion is on FX. It's like the special edition Fox. And who knows what they're going to do with Halpern's content? I mean, Fox itself has so many subsidiaries. But I just saying I wouldn't be surprised if the whole company goes in a new direction. And if it's one similar to what we're seeing with Tales from the Loop, I'm all about it. So.
Got it. So
I thought I'd continue with our special segment and to focus on Nathan Halpern and his involvement in the show. And I brought more artwork. Again, the artwork is from Simon Stollenhag, the guy who inspired this whole series. But while he created the source material, the show is very much Nathaniel Halpern's vision. He saw the artwork, and that's what it's based on. It has nothing to do with the RPG that I had mentioned last time, to the point where Steven said that Nathan wanted these stories to be personal for him in the way that the paintings and landscapes are for me. So that's not a direct quote, it's a paraphrase. So this series, while based on someone else's artwork, is very personal to Nathaniel Halpern's interests. So he definitely wanted to capture the essence of Stollenhag's work, and that's exuded in that the primary family of the show, they drive a Volvo, which is a European car, and they wear a lot of jackets and knitted sweaters that are very European, where some of the other cast members wear American, because it's an amalgamation of those influences. But it's Halpern's world that we're living in. Like, is I think Steven supplied the aesthetic and the tone, the spirit of the show, but Halpern kind of fit it all together. He justified the European influence with the clothing and the cars as being related to the scientific community traveling from across the globe to work at this loop facility. So he's the one who's taking these puzzle pieces that the artist provided and creating it into a story. The episodes are quiet and contemplative, like the paintings. They really depict blockbuster disasters in the same way that like Stranger Things does, and that's where those shows start to separate. It's set in the '80s, but it's not doing it through specific cultural references. It's all about tone, so that way it can feel more timeless. They said the word is timeless, and so much of the show is about our experience with time. And as far as the futurist aesthetic with the robots, well, they're lying around, they're old junk. And he said they're taken for granted more often than not. They just exist in the landscape and have a mundane, clunky quality. I'm a big fan of science fiction, but so often I find that science fiction elements are fetishized like shiny toys, and that the characters of the world take a bit of the back seat. But here, it's just there and it's for granted. There's an exciting level of reality that's created because it's not being shown off. It's just there, and I think that's rather unique. I haven't seen that before. He didn't want people to be distracted by all the tech and the mystery of what's underground. He just wanted people to focus on the characters that just have to live in this sci-fi world.
Well,
So that's
yeah.
the other big piece of the puzzle here.
Thank you. I love the show, and I love where it's going, and I love how different it is. And I feel like we're we're guessing half the things we talk about when we're breaking down the episode. But how often can you talk about a show and think you've seen everything, and then you realize you've missed half the stuff? That's what makes these after shows so much fun. So we want to thank you guys, the audience, for being with us, so we can break these down together. And we don't want to just do it ourselves. We want you to comment. So reach out to us on our Instagram and on online on our YouTube channel. Leave comments below and give us thumbs up and let us know the questions you have and the discoveries you made. I will bet you there will be some times when Kevin or I are like, wait, what? That happened? And we'll we'll be sure to talk about it on future episodes. If you're listening to a podcast version, if you'll go to Apple iTunes and give us 5 stars, or I'm going to call them 5 eclipses after this loop, what the loop thing is.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the eclipse is. It could be star matter for all I know.
It could be, right? We don't know. So anything else besides before we sign off, any predictions?
No. Because I'm now that we're in the second episode, and from what I've read of this article, by the way, if you guys want to check out the article I was checking out, I read through a few of them. This was my favorite. It's from engadget.com, engadget.com. That was a really nice way to get a feel for the show. And so on that note, no, I have no predictions. It's a new story every episode. And I'm certain now that the loop, whatever it is something completely new and different every time. I love that you are going to be looking for patterns, because I'm not going to be able to pull that off.
Okay.
I personally don't think we're going to see any.
I'm going to make
you connected those dots between 1 and 2, so I could be wrong.
Yeah. And I'm going to make a prediction that there's a good possibility we may never go back inside. There may never be a loop / eclipse episode that explains everything. We went in on the first episode, we saw Russ, or we saw Loretta take her younger self in. I wouldn't pull it past the writers that we don't really ever go further than that.
There was one more quotation I pulled from Halpern, who was talking about why they showed the loop on the first episode, and he just goes, "Here's the MacGuffin." Like, there it is.
And there we go. All right.
It's out of the way. We're done. We're not talking about it anymore. So.
All right. So that is episode 2, Transpose. Before we go, Kevin, where can people find you online?
You guys can find me on Twitter at Kevin Allen Says and Instagram at Kevin Allen Graham.
Perfect. And you can find me on Instagram at Lauren Kling, LORENKLING. Send us your questions, your thoughts about the shows on our AfterBuzz YouTube channel, on our Instagram and Twitter. From everybody at AfterBuzz TV, thank you for watching. See ya in the next episode, everybody.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.